Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Spinnaker Dumas Automatic Classic Black. This watch is available from spinnakerwatches.com for €366. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the specifications of the piece. So the watch comes in a watch box which is housed inside this outer cardboard box, and on the side we have a QR code you can scan with your Android or iPhone, and that will register your watch on spinnakerwatches.com and activate the 2-year international warranty. This is the watch box, and as you can see, the lid is upholstered with a fabric to a good standard, so aesthetically pleasing. And one removes the lid, which is a snug fit on the base, and inside we have a protective foam panel which does a good job of protecting the watch in shipping. So the base is also upholstered with fabric in contrasting blue, and we have a foam block with a cutout, and the watch sits on a block of foam which does a good job of protecting it in shipping from moving around, and this is a snug fit in the base which is also made from foam. In the right hand portion we have a cutout which houses the warranty card, which I'll show you. It's branded with Spinnaker and finished to a good standard, so good presentation. So with the watch, one gets this plastic warranty card, and on the reverse it has a QR code you can scan with your Android or iPhone, and that will download the owner's instruction manual and the terms and conditions of the 2-year international warranty, as well as the affiliate program should you wish to become an affiliate of Spinnaker Watches. Also the Instagram tag Spinnaker Watches and their Facebook page Spinnaker Watches Official, so good to have the social media contacts, and also you can simply download the owner's instruction manual as an alternative to having a printed booklet, which is the convention. Now I want to give due credit to Spinnaker here because they've covered this watch, which is a low tier piece costing €366, with a 2-year international warranty. Often low tier brands only cover their watches at this price point with a 12-month international warranty. To get 2 years of international warranty is good, and they deserve full credit for that. Now inside this plastic bag I have put the sticker, and this comes on the case back. So as an alternative to scanning the QR code on the side of the outer cardboard box, you can scan the case back sticker, and that will also register your watch on spinnakerwatches.com and activate the 2-year international warranty. And lastly, one also gets this cardboard tag which has Spinnaker on one side, and on the reverse we have the full reference number of the piece and also the barcode. So with regards to the specifications of the piece, we have a 45.5mm case diameter. Now this is something I want you to note, because on the Spinnaker website, spinnakerwatches.com, in the specifications, Spinnaker erroneously states the diameter as 44mm, but that is actually erroneous. I measure and weigh every single watch I review on my channel, because sometimes on watch brand websites the specifications contain errors, for example with the dimensions. So Spinnaker state this as 44, but I've actually measured it with my digital caliper vernier, and I can confirm the actual diameter is 45.5. So it's 1.5mm larger than Spinnaker state. That's something to be aware of. We have a lug-to-lug measurement of 48mm and a thickness of 15mm. The lug width is 22mm. Now the hexad bracelet is flared, that's something to bear in mind. So it has a 22mm lug width, but the bracelet is wider at the head of the piece. It flares from 23.5mm at the head of the piece, and it tapers down to 20mm at the 2-button push flip lock clasp. Solid 316L grade stainless steel flip lock clasp with 2-button pushes, and the flip lock is signed with Spinnaker engraved with high definition engraving. Beautiful luster to the body, which is satin finished, and that complements the longitudinal brushed satin finishing to the flanks. 2-button push triggers are correctly proportioned, and they're deburred and chamfered very well. No sharp edges, doesn't have sharp corners, although it is a light gauge of pressed stainless steel. I'd prefer to see a solid milled 316L grade stainless steel clasp, which is higher quality. Also I'd like to see a larger clasp with micro adjustments such as a ratcheting mechanism, because we've only got the minimum 3 micro adjustment holes in the flanks. That really isn't enough for a dive piece. In the absence of half links in the hexad bracelet, it really does need 3 or 4 micro adjustments, or alternatively a micro adjustment mechanism. This is disappointing, so poor quality clasp, the gauge is too light, so there's room for improvement. We have a flat sapphire crystal with clear AR coating on the underside, and the clear anti-reflective coating does an outstanding job of reducing the glare and the highly reflective nature of the metallic silver handset. Now, brushed satin finish handset does reduce some of the reflection, but we do also have silver applied indices on the matte black dial, but they're brushed satin finished indices rather mirror polished, and that also reduces the glare and reflective nature of the metallic indices and the metallic handset. This piece is inspired by 1970s dive pieces, and so it has a large sword shape plunger hand, and I like the plunger hand. It does give it the aesthetic of a 1970s piece. Also like the orange colour tone because it matches the orange rectangles at the indices, and it does look very aesthetically pleasing. Matte black dial is the correct choice rather than a glossy black enamel dial because that also reduces the reflection. So as you can see, when I tilt the piece at an oblique angle, the AR coating works very well to reduce the glare. I like the symmetry of the dial. The indices are correctly proportioned and the handset is correctly proportioned. You can see the plunger orange minute hand is significantly larger than the hour hand. This was the style used in the 1960s and 1970s, and I like it. It gives it a vintage aesthetic. The silver applied Spinnaker brand logo at 12 o'clock is very well finished and also very aesthetically pleasing. I like the dial isn't over-branded with unnecessary text and specification. Often low-tier brands have a tendency to over-brand the dial with unnecessary text. We simply have automatic in orange, which complements the plunger hand, and the orange indices, which are printed on the dial. And then we have the water resistance rating, 1000 feet / 300 m, which denotes 300 meters. So just the right amount of information. The dial is clean. Also like the 24-hour white Arabic numerals on the inside of the indices. That also is very functional. The legibility is good because the font is fine, it's crisp and sharp, it's not too thick and blurry. So the quality of the printing to the dial is very good. I like the large white minute ticks on the chapter ring and the orange rectangles next to each of the applied indices. Symmetry is good, legibility is good, functionality is good. So it's a very well crafted applied indices on the dial, and also the printing is high definition, so it's good. With regards to bezel, it's solid 316L grade stainless steel, mirror polished and gear tooth profile, aggressive gear tooth teeth. They've been deburred and chamfered very well because they've got a nice large bevel on the top edge, so that deletes the sharp edges to the gear tooth teeth. It's grippy and tactile, but it is low profile as per a gear tooth bezel used on 1970s dive pieces, which this is inspired by. Now, the bezel insert is made from sapphire crystal, which is fully lumed with C3 Superlume Nova. Spinnaker specify that the lume is Swiss Superlume Nova, and it does look like C3 Superlume Nova, so it's very good quality. And I really like the glossy finish to the sapphire bezel insert. They deserve credit because they could have used the cost-cutting measure of just using a ceramic bezel insert, but sapphire crystal, which is fully lumed, is more expensive. It increases production costs, but it is good. The legibility is good, functionality is good, but also it's very aesthetically pleasing. First quarter, the first 15-minute ticks are fully indexed, and the triangle is fully lumed with C3, as are the hour markers. So the bezel execution is very good. I like its low profile, and I like the glossy finish of the sapphire bezel insert. Sapphire crystal is, of course, very scratch resistant, as per the sapphire crystal used in the front and the exhibition caseback. With regards to the crown, it's solid 316L grade stainless steel, knurled finish, aggressive knurling to it, so it's very grippy and tactile. But however, I think they've made an error with regards to the proportion, because what they've done is they've added an acrylic domed cap to it. Now, it's signed with a Spinnaker emblem to a high standard, which is silver, but rather than using sapphire crystal, this dome is made from acrylic. And of course, acrylic isn't as hard as sapphire crystal, therefore it's going to be prone to being scuffed and scratched with daily wear and tear. The other problem is it makes the crown too large, because adding this domed cap to it makes the crown stick out from the crown guards, and that really negates the purpose of the crown guards. The crown guards are meant to protect the knurled crown from impact damage, but by having this large domed cap on it, it extends the knurled crown past the crown guards, and therefore they don't provide adequate protection. They should have just made it a square end, which is flat on the end of the knurled crown, and then the crown guards would be correctly proportioned. But as it stands, the knurled crown looks too large, it's too long, and although it is grippy and tactile, this acrylic cap really doesn't add anything to it. It just makes it more prone to impact damage, and it makes the crown look too large. The proportion is now too large. Angular case, which is brutalist design, does look like a tonneau case from the 1960s or 1970s. I like the angular facets to it. Nice large mirror polished bevels, which mark the transition between the top of the brutalist angular lugs and the angular hexagon profile to the case shape. So I like the angular flats, and also it's got vertical brushed satin finishing, which makes a refreshing change from mirror polished flanks or alternatively longitudinal brushed satin finishing. The vertical brushed satin finishing is very high quality, nice fine grained finish to it, and I like the way it catches the light with the luster. Just bear with me, I'll get the camera to focus on it, and you can see the vertical brushed satin finishing on the angular flanks is done to a very good standard. So Nice hexagon shape to it, and it does give it a 1970s aesthetic of a tonneau case, and it does match the hexad profile to the bracelet links. So with regards to the bracelet, beautiful luster to the top side, underside and flanks, hexad profile to it, and they've mirror polished the edges, the bevels of the hexad links to a very high standard, flawless mirror polishing to the bevels, and also the brush satin finishing has a nice fine grained finish, so beautiful luster to it. No sharp edges to the top edge or the low edge of the flanks, so it doesn't pull arm hairs, and it articulates freely. No stiff links, so that's the benefits. However, the end link does have excess play, longitudinal, lateral, side to side and up and down play in every single direction, and as you can see, we're looking at significant play. This is simply down to the hole in the end link in the bracelet being too large for the spring bar, so they need to use a thicker spring bar, or alternatively drill the hole smaller in the end link. That would tighten up the tolerances and create an interference friction fit, because as it stands it's sloppy, and it's simply down to poor quality tolerances because the hole is too large or the spring bar is undersized for the size of the hole. Very easy to correct, but disappointing to see at this price point, €366, because it rattles, as you can see. Now, this bracelet uses push pins, which is a cost-cutting measure in order to reduce production costs per piece and maximise profit margin per piece. I'd really like to see screw pins used at this price point in the hexad bracelet, because as you can see, it's sloppy. We've got excess longitudinal, lateral, side to side and up and down play in every single one of the hexad links. So let's check the other side for continuity. Again, end link articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink, so that's the positive, but lateral, side to side, up and down, longitudinal play. And it's significant. Problem is it rattles. My concern is the long-term durability. How long is it going to be before this undersized spring bar in the oversized hole causes the excess shear load to make it shear, and the spring bar breaks and comes out of the head of the piece? This is the problem, durability. Now, every one of the push pin links in the hexad bracelet has excess play. It's sloppy and it rattles. Articulates freely, so it does wrap around the wrist very smoothly, doesn't feel stiff or kink, doesn't have any sharp edges on the top edge or the low edge, doesn't pull arm hairs, so it is comfortable, but rattles. One could be magnanimous about this amount of play with a €100 and below price point piece in the low tier. This is a low tier piece. One has to be magnanimous and expect some cost cutting measures, but €366 is not acceptable. They need to tighten up the tolerances. Ideally, I'd like to see them upgrade to using screw pins, because that would tighten up each of the links. That would reduce the play. The problem with using these push pins, which are split pin push pins rather than pin and collars, is they are loose. Again, this is simply down to the holes being too large and the pins being undersized. They don't have an interference friction fit. They are sloppy. Let's look at the clasp in detail. So, solid 316L grade stainless steel clasp, doesn't have any sharp edge on the top edge, low edge or the undercut to the flanks, so that's the benefit. Doesn't have sharp corners, so it's been deburred and chamfered well. Beautiful luster to the brush satin finishing to the body, and that complements the longitudinal brush satin finishing to the flanks, but it's a very light gauge. The flip block is light gauge, the body is light gauge, and they really need to enhance this. They could update this to a solid milled body, longer clasp, 3 or 4 micro adjustments, and also ratcheting mechanism. This would be beneficial. Now, the other error is they've engraved stainless steel upside down, so I'll clarify why I say it's upside down. The majority of collectors wear a piece on their left wrist. So you take the watch off your wrist as so, then you turn it around this way, and you open the clasp from left to right, like so. And therefore this is the correct orientation, the correct way up. And as you can see, stainless steel is now inverted. It should be the other way up. They simply need to invert the engraving because it's now upside down. As I've detailed, the majority of collectors wear their pieces on the left wrist, not the right. Therefore this is upside down. It's embarrassing. They should not be getting the fundamentals like this incorrect. One could be magnanimous about this below €100, but not at €365, €366. It needs to be engraved the right way up. Let's check the hinge pins. Left hand hinge pin articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink, but excess play. So it's riveted at the ends. My concern is long-term durability. How long is it going to be before the excess play, the excess load on the riveted pin causes it to shear and it rattles? Centre hinge pin articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink, so that's good, but excess play, longitudinal, lateral, side to side, up and down play in every single direction. Again, the riveted ends, how long is it going to be before the riveted ends of the pin in the centre pin? The excess shear load causes it to fail. It will shear, or alternatively, the rivets will wear off in the elongated holes. Long-term durability is the issue with poor quality tolerances like this. Finally, let's check the right-hand hinge pin. Articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink, but it's got excess play. Longitudinal, lateral, side to side, up and down play in every single direction, and it's significant play. So cumulative effect is left hand, centre and right hand hinge pin all have excess play. It's a sloppy, solid mill clasp, and it's embarrassing to see stainless steel engraved upside down, but my concern is long-term durability, and it rattles. It makes a clicking sound. They need to tighten up the tolerances of the left-hand, centre and right-hand hinge pin. Simply make the holes smaller, alternatively use larger diameter pins that will tighten up the tolerances to make the 3 hinge pins interference fit, friction fit, because as it stands, it's sloppy. Now that's not the only problem I want to bring to your attention. They've used this abhorrent diver's extension link because it does not have micro adjustment. It only has the minimum 3 holes, which is not satisfactory. And they've used this very light gauge of pressed stainless steel for the diver's extension link. Now, we're not looking at a €100 low tier piece. This is €366 within the low tier. They should have at the minimum used a solid milled EasyLink style extension. Pagani Design are using it on the PD1661. And if they can do it at the €100 price point, there's no excuse for Spinnaker using a pressed diver's extension link at the €366 price point. It's over 3 times more expensive, but it's not a solid milled EasyLink style extension. As per the Pagani Design PD1661, it's pressed. Very light gauge, and the pins rattle. Excess play. Centre hinge pin is dreadful. Spring bar also has too much play in the body, and the right hand push pin also has excess play. So cumulative effect is spring bar in the left, centre hinge pin and the right hand push pin all have too much play. So as you can see, play in every direction, light gauge. They haven't even mirror polished it. So as a production cost cutting measure, they've simply matte bead blasted effect, because matte bead blasting is less expensive than mirror polishing. It cuts production costs per piece and therefore maximises profit margin per piece for Spinnaker. It's dreadful. They should simply delete this. It's abhorrent. But on a positive note, it does snap into the body with a nice positive click, and it does deploy with a nice positive click. So it does work okay, but it is dreadful quality. Below €100, one could be magnanimous, but one cannot be magnanimous about this kind of dreadful, abhorrent diver's extension link on a €366 piece. Right, so I'll show you the case back. Exhibition case back glazed with sapphire crystal, and it does a good job of displaying the movement use, which is the Seiko NH35A automatic. Sapphire crystal glazing is good. The stainless steel portion is concentric CNC lathe tool machine to a good standard, milled slots are deburred and chamfered to a good standard, no sharp edges, and the circumference is engraved with the specification and reference number of the piece. No sharp edges to the engraving. It is a bubble back case back, and it's far too thick. So 300 metres of hermetic seal is impressive, but it's far too deep. It's a bubble back case back rather than being a flat profile. It doesn't need this amount of clearance between the sapphire crystal glazing and the rotor. Yes, the NH35A is a thick movement, but however, the rotor does not need so much clearance. It's got far too much clearance, so they've made the case back too thick, it's too deep, and also the sapphire crystal is too thick. I do appreciate it has 300 metres of hermetic seal. The crystal needs to be thicker than a 200 metre seal, but they've made the case back too deep. They could reduce this by 1mm. Now the thing to note is this is a very thick piece. It's 15mm, and the thickness is caused by 2 errors. The flat sapphire crystal in the front of the piece is 2mm thick. It's far too thick. They could reduce this by 1mm. That would save 1mm on the thickness of the piece and still be 300 metres hermetic seal. The case back is too deep. They could reduce the stainless steel portion by 2mm. That would reduce this piece by 2. So 1mm reduction on the front with the sapphire crystal, 2mm reduction on the stainless steel portion of the exhibition case back. That saves 3mm. That would reduce this piece from 15, which is too thick, down to 12, which is optimum for comfort level and feel good factor. So exhibition case back is nice and smooth. The sapphire crystal does feel comfortable against the wrist. The stainless steel portion does feel comfortable, so it doesn't feel sharp, doesn't feel scratchy. The underside to the head of the piece is well finished. It's concentric CNC lathe tool machined. The undercuts to the flanks have been deburred and chamfered very well. The undercuts to the crown guards, which are angular, are deburred very well. And the tips of the lugs have nice chamfers. So they've done a good job of finishing the head of the piece. The case doesn't have any sharp edges, which is good. So let's test the screw down crown execution and test the bezel execution. So screw down crown provides an effective hermetic seal to 300 meters. Let's test unscrewing it. It feels stiff. It's not rough or gritty, but it doesn't feel silky smooth. And this is disappointing because other brands in the low tier, such as Steel Dive with the SD1953 and Pagani Design with the PD1661, they are €80 and €100 price point pieces respectively. They have silky smooth screw down crowns. So it is possible for a Chinese brand or a Chinese made watch to have a silky smooth crown at the below €100 price point. This is €366, over 3 times more expensive than an SD1953 and 3 times more expensive than a PD1661. The crown feels stiff, so it's not rough or gritty, but one can feel the friction, and the friction is caused by 2 reasons. First reason is metal to metal friction, so the internal thread of the stainless steel crown meshing against the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. You can feel the stainless steel rubbing against the stainless steel. So this indicates poor quality tolerances in the machining, the build quality, quality control and the finishing. So they need to refine the finishing. The internal thread needs to be machined better and the external thread of the crown tube needs to be machined better. So to make the threads deeper and therefore reduce friction of the metal to metal contact. The other friction is caused by the rubber O-ring gasket. So there are 2 rubber O-ring hermetic seals. One rubber O-ring gasket inside the stainless steel crown, and that seals the crown to the end of the stainless steel crown tube. The second rubber O-ring gasket or hermetic seal is inside the crown tube, and that seals the winding stem to the crown tube. So the 2 rubber O-ring gaskets provide an effective hermetic seal to 300 meters. So unfortunately they're too tight. The rubber O-rings, you can feel the friction of the crown rubber O-ring rubbing against the end of the crown tube, and you can also feel the friction of the rubber O-ring inside the crown tube rubbing against the winding stem. Cumulative effect is you've got friction from the rubber O-ring gaskets added to friction from the threads, and this makes the crown stiff. It's not silky smooth as a result. Disappointing at this price point, but when it's fully unscrewed, we're now in the manual wind position. So one can manually wind the Seiko NH35A automatic to its maximum 41-hour power reserve. Does feel pleasant to manually wind. It's one of my favourite movements because I like the smoothness of the manual winding. Feels reliable and robust, but it also feels very smooth and pleasant to manually wind. Doesn't feel rough or gritty. One can feel the tension in the mainspring gradually building up. Nice medium firm resistance. The gearing meshes very well, so it feels pleasant to manually wind. Pulling it out to the first click position is the quick set date complication. So when you rotate the knurled crown anti-clockwise, if you look at the date window, you can see the date clicks over to the next day of the month. One thing I really like about the NH35A is the quick set complication for the dates because it's got a nice heavy indexing. Feels solid, feels reliable, feels robust. I like the heavy clicking. So to put it into perspective, the clicking quickset feels heavier than a Miyota 8215, which you'll all be familiar with, or alternatively a Miyota 9015, which is one of my personal favourites. They have a lighter quickset action to the date complication. The NH35A has a heavier clicking feeling, but it feels good, it feels solid. The alignment of the double and the single Arabic numerals are correct. The font is nice and fine, it's crisp and sharp. The white contrasts very well with the black dates wheel, and the alignment is correct. They're not too far to the left or the right of the silver frame, and they're not too high or too low. So the alignment is correct, and also the proportions of the the proportions of the Arabic numerals are correct. Pulling it out to the second click hacks the movement. If you look at the second hand, you can see it's now stopped dead, so therefore it's possible to set the time precisely to the second with the Caliber NH35A automatic. So, rotating the hands feels good, feels smooth, 24 joules, so it's a low friction movement, minimal back play. I like the large orange plunger minute hand because it looks like a 1960s or 1970s plunger hand, and it's very legible. Minimal back play to it. There is some slight back play, but it is necessary because If it didn't have backplay in the meshing of the gearing, when you push back in the crown, it would cause the plunger minute hand to jump out of position. So one does need some slack, it does need some backplay in the gearing, but it's minimal. There's an almost immediate response. When you rotate the knurled crown clockwise and anti-clockwise, the plunger minute hand almost immediately moves, which is good. So it's responsive, that's what I like. Pushing it back in, it's got a nice positive click, and that restarts the movement. You can see the second hand begins to sweep around the dial once again at the characteristic 3 Hz sweep. Now, the negative, subjectively, this runs at 21,600 vibrations per hour, which is a frequency of 3 Hz. The problem with that is it stutters or judders around the dial. It's not as smooth as a 4 Hz sweep, such as the Miyota 9015, which runs at 28,800 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 4 Hz. I prefer a 4 Hz sweep because the second hand looks more aesthetically pleasing, sweeping around smoothly. It's subjective. For the majority of collectors, they don't mind the stutter or judder of the 3 Hz sweep of a NH35A. It's something you just have to live with, but something to be aware of. Let's test screwing the crown back down. Immediate thread pickup. So there's a perfect interface between the internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. The threads mesh very well. The pickup is good, but they just don't feel smooth. They don't feel silky smooth. There is a lot of friction. It feels stiff. So you've got to really get a good grip of it with your index finger and thumb and really turn it with a lot of torsion in order to get it to screw down. It does screw down smoothly, but it's just not refined. It's just not silky smooth. Spinnaker really need to improve upon this, because below €100 one could be magnanimous about a stiff crown, but at €366 it has to be silky smooth. Does unscrew and screw down okay, but it's just not silky smooth, so disappointing. Let's check the bezel execution. So 120 click unidirectional bezel, as one would expect. Gear tooth profile, which is grippy and tactile despite it being low profile. Sapphire bezel insert is clearly legible, so very stiff. Now, it's not a negative. I like the firm execution of it, but it does feel heavy. So to put this into perspective, it's a heavier feeling than a Seiko 5KX, which has medium resistance. This feels heavier than a Pagani designed PD1661, which you'll be familiar with, or alternatively it feels heavier than a Steel Dive SD1953, which you may also be familiar with. They have light resistance. This feels much heavier. It feels more like a Seiko 5KX or even heavier than a 5KX. It's good in terms of it's tight. So, no lateral side-to-side play, that's the benefit. No back play whatsoever. It's a nice tight bezel execution. Now, it is low profile, so one has to really grip it with an index finger and thumb to get purchase, because they have mirror polished the gear tooth teeth. The gear tooth teeth are aggressive in their profile. They are large, but it's got a large chamfer and it is low profile, so therefore it's quite slippery, and one really has to grip it hard or grip it tightly between one's index finger and thumb to get purchase on it. But I can do it with my glove, so it does work okay. Now, no lateral side-to-side play, no back play. I like it's tight. Feels even all the way through the 360 degrees of rotation. Doesn't get tighter or looser, so it's good. It feels solid, it feels reliable. Nice, loud, audible clicks. Let's check the alignment. I like the heavy feeling. Feels nice and tight. Perfect. The Lume the loomed triangle, which is inlaid into the sapphire bezel insert, perfectly aligns with the 12 o'clock index on the dial and the 60-minute tick on the chapter ring. So, perfect alignment. This is excellent. Very heavy bezel execution. No lateral side-to-side play. No back play. Even all the way through the 360 degrees of rotation, perfect alignment. This is an example to other low-tier microbrands of how to get bezel execution correct. I like it. It feels firm, but it feels good. So, I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now, I haven't sized the bracelet, and I'm pleased to report that this comes with a very long hexad bracelet. I'm on the maximum 3 out of 3 micro adjustments, so that's something to bear in mind. This is the absolute maximum size. I can easily slide 2 fingers beneath the bracelet and clasp at all times. This will actually fit up to a very large wrist size of even 9 inches. So, there are enough removable links in the hexad bracelet to reduce the size down to a minimum 6-inch wrist size, up to a maximum 9-inch wrist size. Now, the thing to notice, this is a very heavy piece. With all the links in the hexad bracelet, and it is a very long hexad bracelet, far too long even for my 8-inch wrist, This would fit up to 9 inches. This piece weighs 209 grams. It's one of the heaviest pieces I have reviewed on my channel. Of course, it's 45.5. It's one of the largest pieces I've reviewed in diameter. One has to expect heft with a 45.5 piece like this with a hexad bracelet. But it's very heavy. 209. Now you're going to reduce the heft significantly if you remove 6 or 7 links. Now, for example, I have an 8-inch wrist. Even I would remove 4 or 5 links from this bracelet. The thing I would say is, immediately, if you have a 6 to 7-inch wrist, you can rule this piece out because it's too large. 45.5 does dominate the wrist. It wears with wrist presence, as one would expect. The negative is it's too thick. This is 15 millimeters thick, and you can really feel it and also see it because it's noticeably thick. Bubble back case back adds 1 millimeter of thickness too much. The sapphire crystal is 2 millimeters too thick. So they could have saved 3 millimeters of the head of the piece by reducing the sapphire crystal by 2, reducing the case back by 1, and that would reduce it by 3 millimeters down to 12. But you can see it's a very large piece. Dominates the wrist. You can really feel the 209 grams. Now, I often refer to 150 grams as the sweet spot for a 40 millimeter to 42 because 150 grams and below is the sweet spot, regardless of whether you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist or a 7 to 8 inch wrist respectively. 150 grams is comfortable to wear for 8 to 12 hours per day. 209 grams is far too heavy. Even if you remove 5 or 6 links, that's only going to reduce it to circa 170 grams. It's still 20 grams too heavy. It's a very thick bracelet. There's a lot of meat on it because it tapers from 23.5 down to 20. I appreciate that the perfection personified 20 to 16 taper is not going to be enough meat on the bracelet to balance a 45.5 head of the piece. So they can't use a 20 to 16, but they could have used the other industry standard, which is 22 to 18. That would reduce some of the meat on the hexad bracelet. As it stands, it's flared and it's far too thick or far too wide because we've got 23.5 at the lugs, and then down to 20, 23.5 down to 20. This is where the additional 20 grams excess heft comes from. It's not the head of the piece, it's actually the hexad bracelet. Too much meat on it. If this were 22 down to 18, this would reduce it by 20 grams. So this would reduce the heft of this piece from 209 grams down to 189. So it really needs that 20 gram reduction. Bracelet's far too wide. Head of the piece is also too thick, as you can see, 15 millimeters. The thing to note is it does have the perfect sweet spot 48 millimeter lug to lug measurement, and I often refer to that in my reviews because 48 is the perfect sweet spot regardless of whether you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist or a 7 to 8 inch wrist respectively. 48 lug to lug does fit all wrist sizes. It's just a shame that Spinnaker didn't make this in a 40 or 42 millimeter head of the piece rather than a 45.5. I appreciate that this is inspired by vintage 1970s pieces, so it does have a tonneau case shape. It's brutalist design with the hexagon shape to the tonneau case and the angular profile to it, which is brutalist, but far too large. 42 is the real maximum, even with this design, which is brutalist. The problem is at 45.5, it sits on top of the wrist like a slab, a thick slab of 316L grade stainless steel. The flanks of the case, which are angular, are tall slabs, and you can really see the slab-sided flanks. Just bear with me, I'll get the camera to focus on them. It's a very tall-sided, slab-sided piece. They really need to reduce the thickness or the height of the slab sides on the hexad profile or the hexagon profile to the head of the piece, because at 45.5 it is noticeable. So it's too heavy and it's too thick for comfort. Feel good factor is good. When I say good, visually it looks aesthetically pleasing. I like the large orange plunger hand. I like the fully Lume sapphire bezel inserts, and it does look like a 1970s tonneau case. So aesthetically it does look pleasing, but comfort level is poor, purely down to the excess heft and also the thickness. 15 millimeters, 45.5 is too large, and the main problem is the taper. The bracelet is far too flared, 23.5 down to 20, far too much meat on this hexad bracelet. If this were 42, and they also reduced the taper from 22 to 18, reduced the heft of it by 20 grams, yes, then the comfort level and feel good factor would be enhanced. Alternatively, if they made this in a 40 millimeter with a 20 to 16 taper, of course, 150 grams would be more satisfactory. So if you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist, you can rule it out. It's too large and too heavy. Even if you have a larger 7 to 8 inch wrist, I would say consider the wrist presence. It is large and it is heavy, not going to be comfortable to wear for long periods of time. On a rubber strap, of course, that would enhance the comfort level because that would reduce the heft of the piece by circa 50 grams. On a rubber strap, I think it would be more satisfactory. Right, so let's do a Lume test and we'll see how the Lume performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to the absolute peak. So Spinnaker state this is lumed with Swiss Superluminova, and I can confirm it does look like C3 Superluminova. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, it has not disappointed, but clearly looking at 5 to 6 layers on the sapphire bezel insert, 5 to 6 layers on the applied indices, and 5 to 6 layers on the handset. I really like the large orange plunger minute hand because it does give the aesthetic of a vintage 1960s or 1970s piece, but you can see the legibility, the benefits. You can clearly differentiate between the smaller pencil hour hand and the large plunger minute hand, so it does aesthetically look very similar to a 1970s plunger hand. They've done a good job of inlaying the sapphire crystal bezel inserts. 15-minute ticks are clearly indexed, as are the hour markers. The indices are correctly proportioned. Now in daylight conditions, the C3 Superluminova is white. It doesn't look more cream on the dial or the hands. So they've done a good job with the colour tone matching of the dial and the hands. Both look white. In the dark, they both have the same green tone. So I'm just going to charge it up again to its maximum. The exciter does have potency, and we're clearly looking at 5 to 6 layers. And I'm pleased to see that unlike many other low-tier Chinese-made watches, they haven't used the production cost-cutting measure of 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 layers on the dial and hands to cut production costs and maximise profit margin per piece. This clearly uses 5 to 6, and you can see the exciter is potent. On the bezel inserts, the dial and the hands, the green tone matches, so it's good. A full 5 to 6 layers on all 3 places, and I like to see a fully lumed sapphire crystal bezel insert versus the cost-cutting measure of ceramic. It's very good. I like it, I like the symmetry, I like the orientation of it, and of course it is acceptable to have the absence of a index at the 3 o'clock position because we've got the frame date complication. Plunger minute hand really is exceptional. It's large, sort of sword shaped, and of course the legibility is very good. So I like it, I like the green tone of it, and I think they've made the correct decision by using green C3 rather than BGW9, because this green C3 does look like tritium lume, which was used in the 1970s. Right, so let's discuss the movement used. You'll all be familiar with the Seiko NH35A automatic, which is made in Japan. It's been in service since 2011, so at this stage in 2025, it's a reliable, well-proven workhorse movement. Has 24 joules, and it runs at 21,600 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 3 Hz. It has hand winding and hacking, which are useful complications, and a quick set date complication, which, as I've demonstrated, works very well. 41-hour power reserve is perfectly acceptable. The stated accuracy of the NH35A is -20 to +40 seconds per day, so a rather wide accuracy range. However, I'm pleased to report that Spinnaker are doing a good job of regulating the NH35As they're using. This one has clearly been regulated in 5 positions because it's running consistently at +8. +8 is well within the stated accuracy of -20 to +40 seconds per day. So +8 is acceptable for an NH35A, and I'm pleased that Spinnaker are doing a good job of regulating the movements used. At this price point, it is acceptable to use an NH35A. The thing I like about it above all else, it's reliability. It's well proven. It's been in service since 2011. It is a robust, reliable, durable movement. It's a well proven workhorse caliber. So I like the hand winding, I like the hacking, the quick set complication has a nice solid feeling to it, that's something I really like. I like the smoothness of the manual winding, and I think at this price point one can't expect to see a higher grade movement such as a Miyota 9015, which is a premium Miyota caliber. At the €400 plus price point, yes, one does start to see the 9015, but at €366, the NH35A is acceptable. So good movement, correct choice at this price point. So lastly, I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch meets 2 criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So low tier piece, price point is €366. I'm going to declare it okay quality, but I'm going to declare it as poor value. The reason why I say okay quality rather than good quality or excellent quality is because of the bracelet. it rattles. The end links are sloppy, the bracelet pushpin links are sloppy, and it has this abhorrent pressed stainless steel clasp. Now, the play in the clasp is a problem, and also they've made the mistake, which is embarrassing, of engraving stainless steel upside down, but above all else, this abhorrent pressed bead blasted diver's extension link is dreadful. They should delete it. This does not say to me €366. This says to me €100 and below price point in the low tier. This clasp is just not good enough for a micro brand at €366. It needs to be a heavier gauge, 3 or 4 micro adjustment holes or a ratcheting mechanism, and a solid milled EasyLink style extension at this price point. We're not looking at a €100 price point piece. So this downgrades it from excellent or good quality down to okay quality. Value is poor because this does face some stiff competition at €366 price point from other micro brands in the low tier. The NH35A is okay. I like the C3 Superluminova, and I like the Sapphire bezel insert, which is fully lumed. Quality of the finishing to the head of the piece is good. Bezel is well finished. Case back is well finished. The hexad bracelet is very aesthetically pleasing, but of course it's sloppy. They really need to improve or refine the bracelet and also the clasp to match the quality of the head of the piece. What we're looking at here is a good head of the piece on a poor quality bracelet. And this really downgrades it because the head of the piece is good quality and good value. The bracelet lets it down and the clasp lets it down. It downgrades it to okay quality and poor value. So unfortunately I can't recommend it to you for consideration due to the bracelet and clasp. You really need to be aware of that. Good head of the piece. I think it is still worth purchasing, but wearing it on a rubber strap. Above all else, the problem is the thickness. It's far too thick at 15mm, and it's also far too heavy at 209 grams. They should have made this in 40 or 42, and they should have used a 22 to 18 taper, or alternatively a 20 to 16 taper. The bracelet is far too thick at 23.5 down to 20. These are the negatives to be aware of. So I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Spinnaker Dumas Automatic Classic Black version. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you for watching.